And welcome back aboard the Soldering Dutchman, folks. Today on the deck, I have an Xbox Series S that is, of course, broken, but that we're going to try to fix and turn into gaming treasure. Now, the story behind this Xbox Series S is that the previous owner has tried to replace a broken HDMI port and unfortunately was not successful. Of course, that happens quite a bit, and I've seen that numerous times before, so that shouldn't be an issue for us. I'm hoping that we can actually replace the HDMI port, put a new one on there, and then get this thing working again. Now, I'll switch to the other camera so you can see what we have on the board here. This is what I actually got from the customer. These are all separate parts. It came in parts in the box itself, well packaged, but still just in parts. Just from looking at the parts that we have on the deck here, I think everything we need to fully reassemble the Xbox Series S is all there. The most important thing, though, that you always have to check when you get an Xbox Series S or even an Xbox Series X is on the other side of the motherboard for the Series S. It is this SSD that you see over here. And this is absolutely crucial if you want to get this Xbox Series S working again, because these SSDs are bound to the console itself. So even if you got like an identical SSD like this and put it in there, if you didn't have the encrypted data that is in the first gigabyte partition on this SSD, you can't recover this Xbox Series S. Now, I'm hoping that this is the original SSD. I think it is. So I think we're good in this situation. However, before we continue and look at the HDMI port, I just want to put this Xbox back together far enough that we can actually turn it on, see if it comes to life, maybe see if we can pair a controller, because that would indicate to us that everything on this board is perfectly fine and it really is only the HDMI port. So that's the next step. Let's put it back together far enough that we can turn it on and see whether or not this Xbox is still indeed living. Okay, so now we have the Xbox fully assembled, or at least assembled far enough that we can actually turn it on. I've already got my controller ready here, so what we're going to do is hook up power, turn it on, see if we get a light, if the fan spins, and then we're going to try to pair the controller to the console. And if we get all that, then everything is good for this console. Then we're simply going to turn it back off, we're going to replace the port, and hopefully this will once again be gaming treasure. All right, let's hook up the power. So I heard a nice crackle, so that's a good sign. I don't remember if the Series S actually gives you a fan spin. It does. And I think the previous owner probably had it in the mode where it actually turns on in the background. So it can do all sorts of things like updates and whatnot. So that, I think, is why the fan is now spinning. It's sort of on in like a soft mode. So let's try and turn it on for real. Very good. We get a nice beep. We get a light. It's staying on. That's also a good sign. Perfect. So I think this console, it's giving me all good signs. I'm just going to press the pairing button here for a controller. The light is blinking. Turn on the pairing mode here, and yep. So awesome. That's actually really good news. I think this console is working just fine. The only thing wrong with this console, hopefully at least, is the HDMI port. Hopefully the retimer chip and the booster IC and all that sort of stuff is still working. And once we get that HDMI port replaced, this console is again working. All right, and here we can already see some of the damage that has occurred. I'm not quite sure what happened here. It might be that the port was violently ripped off, or that they took it off with hot air and unfortunately ripped a couple of traces. But yeah, if you're not familiar with this, the silver parts are the actual pads on the PCB, or the motherboard if you want. The shiny thing here, that's solder, and the solder is also supposed to be here, 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 and here. But obviously it's not. Now it's brown, which means that the pad, the copper that was underneath this, actually got torn off the board. And together with that, a part of the trace was torn off as well. So you can see this trace was supposed to go all the way over here. This one was supposed to go over here. and then there was supposed to be a trace here and here as well. So that's bad, definitely, but not disastrous for us. We're going to try to use really thin copper wire. You'll see that in a moment, and just actually try to restore these pads. Or in fact, what I might try with this repair, I actually got some of this stuff. This is actually, I don't know if I can put it right next to this. These are actually copper, pieces of copper if you want, really thin. And as you can see, they have virtually the same size as these contacts that you see over here. So if I can, I'm going to try to use these, lay them on the PCB right here, glue them, if you will, to the board with some UV resin. And yeah, then I think we should basically have almost as new contacts on the board that we can then solder a new HDMI port to. So let's go ahead and try that out next. To make my life a little easier, I am going to rotate the board, so bear with me. So next step, I'm going to try to take one of these traces off the board. This is the first time that I'm doing this, so this may or may not go well. Let's find out together. Let me see if I can use a different tweezer. And there we go. I don't like that it's all bent up, but hopefully we can straighten it out and use it that way. Again, this is all really, really, really small. I think this is about 0.1 millimeter, if I'm not mistaken. So I think that looks somewhat decent. Probably still bent a little bit. Yep. So let me see if I can bend it back. Okay, but if I can get that down, then I think that's going to look really, really good. Awesome. Okay. I think because this is the first time that I've done this and that I'm doing this, I am going to try and put some UV gel down first to basically cure this and seat this in place. And if that works, then I can repeat the process for the other traces that we see are missing here. So I'm just going to move this to the side first. Like so. So here I have what's called UV curing solder mask. And that's basically kind of like a paint, if you want, that cures with UV light. That's going to, in this case, actually serve as kind of a glue, if you want, although it's not very strong, but it just has to keep it in place for now. And also it's going to add some protection afterwards to make sure that the contacts are not exposed to basically the environment. So, okay, I'll try and apply some of this to the board underneath or around that little pad. And then hopefully once I cure it, that basically locks it in place and makes sure that that doesn't move around anymore. And again, this is incredibly difficult to maneuver. I don't feel like I'm shaking that much, but every tiny little shake is exaggerated enormously. Come on. All right, perfect. So now I'm going to come in with UV light and hopefully lock that in place. Now I'm just removing this little bit of solder mask because once I come in with the UV light, that's going to harden and I won't be able to remove it. It's a bit wasteful. I think next time I'm just going to put some UV gel on like a different plate so I can grab from that. But that's how it is now. Okay, I think, or at least hope, that that should be enough. Let's give it a slight tug, see if it wants to stay. And no, unfortunately it does not. So I think the problem here is that the UV mask, of course, is underneath the pad, not to the sides. So that's kind of why it's not curing underneath it. Let's see if we can get this one to move a little bit better into place. So what I'm trying to do now is just get the UV gel to cure far enough that it locks it in place, which it seems to have done. And now I'm just going to place this on top and leave it there for a little bit. And that's hopefully going to cure that all the way. So now basically I've just applied the UV gel over the contact pad as well. And I'm hoping that that's going to basically cement it in place, and then I'm just going to use a little scraping tool or like a little Dremel, mini Dremel, to actually get rid of the UV mask that's now on top of the contact pad to reveal the copper again, and then we can apply solder to that. Let's see how that goes. And the curing just takes a little bit, maybe half a minute or a minute or so. Okay, so let's have a look if to see if it cured. And yep, it looks like the UV mask has now cured. So I'm going to carefully just clean it. And that looks pretty good to me. So yeah. I think I'm pretty happy with that result. Now we can carefully maneuver this to follow kind of the contour of the path here. And then hopefully we can connect it back up to this, where we can already see there's like a little bit of exposed copper and what looks like solder on there. So we can just solder that right back to that and do the same process here to connect it up to here. Same one here, over here, and then this we can just lay on top like that. So let me just repeat the same process for the other pads. I'll speed this up. so you don't have to watch me do every individual pad. So you saw me do the second trace. When I did the second trace, I actually thought I would just put UV gel in all of these and do all the traces at once. But then I actually decided against it because I think it's a good idea if we push down on the trace or the pad as we do the initial curing of the gel, and then just let the gel cure all the way. So that way I can be sure that the trace is down flat as far as possible on the board. And if I were to do the traces all at once, I think what's going to end up happening is that some of the traces they lay on top of the UV gel, they are not down far enough, and then we're going to have this height difference between the different pads. So that's what I kind of want to avoid, and that's why I'm doing one trace at a time now. It definitely takes longer, but I think the more I practice, the quicker I'm going to get. At least that's my hope. So far, these two pads, I feel pretty good about them. I can just, again, scrape away the UV mask once I've put all of them down, and then hopefully we can put solder on there, put the new port, and then everything will be fine. So far, I'm really liking this technique, so let's see how this goes. and I think that's looking pretty good. So just testing, make sure that these are attached. Yep, that one's attached. Yes, and yes, for sure they are attached. So I'm just going to apply some UV gel across these and then seal them in place. Then we're going to worry about these connections here. I'm just going to make sure that they are connected to the vias that they belong to. And I think that's looking pretty good. The next thing we need to make sure is that this can be soldered to this via, and then this pad here can also be soldered to this via. I think this little leg needs to be bent this way, but before we can do that, we need to release it from basically the UV mask that we applied there. Okay, so I'd say I'm fairly pleased with the result. There was one pad here, the second pad from the right, that actually lifted a little bit on the right here. So I am going to try to apply a little bit more UV gel to see if we can kind of tack this one down. I think I would not mind if the tip here, so to say, is actually covered by UV gel, because I think once we put the port down, the pins are actually going to touch mostly on the back here, so I think then it should be good. So it can overflow a little bit on the pin just so it keeps it down. I think it does that pretty well on all these other pins. These are down, I think, quite well. This one too. It's just this second to last, so to say, pin that lifted again. So I just want to put that one down. And I think with that, I'm pretty happy. What we now need to do is make sure that these two pins here make contact with their respective vias. These are the holes that basically go from one side of the board to the other. I just need to make sure that there's a good connection here and a good connection here. These two vias are connected together with the solder basically in the middle here. So if I apply a little bit of solder here, this should attach, and a little bit here, then that one should attach. And then I think the pins are attached. I'll also already apply a little bit of solder to the pins themselves. And if that all holds, then I think we're basically ready to reinstall the HDMI port. So I'm just going to clean up the flux from the board a little bit more. And then once we get to install the new port, I'll put a little bit more flux on there, fresh flux. And then everything hopefully goes well. So you just saw me add a little bit of leaded solder to the solder that was already on the board. And that's just to lower the temperature a little bit. Leaded solder actually solders a lot better. And that also means that we don't need to use as much temperature once we get to installing the new HDMI port. We can lower the temperature of the hot air, and then hopefully everything goes a little smoother. I'm not 100% happy with how, for example, the solder on these pins looks, but I think it's actually going to be just fine once I get to install the actual HDMI port. It may actually, as a result of the hot air, smooth out a little bit more. So I think it should be okay. We'll just have a quick look at the other side of the board. You can see that whoever took out the previous port used a lot of heat, and they did not remove this little foam pad here, so this has now essentially disintegrated. So I'm going to remove it. And I think that's about as good as I can get that. So I'm just going to clean this up. And I will just try to add a little bit more leaded solder. All right, and I think that should be enough. Once I get in there with the hot air, that solder is going to flow nicely into those holes, and then when I put the port in, it should flow nicely onto the port. So next step, let's first clean this, and then we'll get a new HDMI port prepped, ready for install, and then we'll get to actually installing the new HDMI port. And here we have the new port. And what we're going to do with this port here is we're just going to pre-tin the pins that you see on the right here. And I'm also going to pre-tin those 4 little pads that you see at the front there. And I think that's about it. I'm not sure if I'm going to pre-tin the legs. I don't know if we need to. I think that's probably going to be fine once we install that with the hot air station. So, okay, let me just pre-tin those pins right there. Okay, perfect. I'm just going to clean the port a little bit before I install it because I used a lot of flux. And now I think we're good. All right, so I've got the Xbox Series S motherboard on a mount. It is raised off of my workbench so that I can use my hot air station with a very wide nozzle to heat up the motherboard from below. That's going to melt the solder that we just put on the board, and because, again, it's leaded solder, it's going to melt at a much lower temperature, which means that we can also reduce the heat that we put basically into the board from below here. That also means that we shouldn't melt the plastic parts. I'm going to try to keep the temperature as low as, let's say, I think I'm going to try 330 degrees Celsius first. See if the solder actually melts. It should melt because the melting temperature of leaded solder is much lower than that. And then once I put the port in, we're just going to wait for the solder to creep up the legs of the port there. And then once that's done, we're going to take the heat away. And then if everything goes well, the port should be properly installed. Before I do that, I'm going to just apply a little bit of flux so that the solder will flow nicely. And I think that's about it. That's all I'm going to use for that. I'm just spreading it a little bit with my finger here so that there's plenty of flux everywhere where it should be. Let's heat up the hot air station, drop in the port, and hope for the best. and we are waiting and looking to see that the solder in these holes liquefies, that the solder on these pins also liquefies. Everything should kind of drop into the holes right there. Once we see that, we know the solder is actually melted, and then we can grab the port and move it on top. And as you can see, the first holes are starting to liquefy. And I think we are now at the point where we can drop the port. I've removed the heat. And I think that's it. So let's take the board back under the microscope and have a look at how well we did. And my first impressions are that I can see that the solder has crept up the legs here, so I'm pretty happy to see that. It looks like these pins are flush with the board and down. I'm just going to poke them and apply a little bit of pressure to see if they are attached to the pins below. And so far all of them are. Solid, solid. That is perfect. These are the ones we repaired. They are not moving. Solid so far. Yep. Oh, that one is loose. Okay, so the final pin is actually loose. That's not a disaster. We can just scrape away a little bit of this via here, the mask off of this via, and then we can attach this right there. And then that should be fine. I think this one is solid on there, even though there's like a little bit of copper sticking out, but that should not be an issue. I think all the rest are nice and solid. So, perfect. Let's touch this one up. And then once that's done, I think that should be the end of this install. Okay, let's see if it's now solid. And yep, that one's not budging. Neither is that. All of these pins are nice and solid. And that means that we have successfully installed this port. Perfect. Let's have a look at the other side. So these joints are a little crusty. That's probably because I mixed it with the existing solder that was there. Ideally, you would remove the solder and just install fresh solder. Here, I was a little bit lazy, but I think it's probably going to be okay. Okay, folks, and here we have the end result. I think it's looking pretty good. I've tried to clean it as much as I can. I can clean it a little bit more. And what I can also do is apply a little bit more UV gel to the traces that we have over here right now, just to give them that extra bit of stability and protection against the environment. But I would say that we do that after we've actually tested whether or not our install works, whether we get video output or not. So next step, let's assemble it again as far as we can, as far as we need to rather, to actually test it out and then see if we can get some video output out of this Xbox. Okay, as you can see, I've just added this video feed right here. That's connected to this HDMI cable. So the next step is to plug in the power cable, turn on the console, and see if we get a video output on this side here. I have not tried this yet, so we're going to discover together whether or not this install actually worked. Okay, power is connected. Do we get fan spin? We do. That's perfect news. We did not break it further. So let's power it on. I do see the light. That went black. And there we go. Look at that. We have video output. Awesome. I'm just going to connect the controller. That is working. Ah, right. This controller has an issue with the D-pad. So that's interesting. Let me get a different controller so I can actually navigate the menu. Now that I have a controller that actually works, we can go to video settings, and here I can see that we do have 4K UHD as an option. I cannot try this because this is a USB capture card, so this is not going to display 4K, but I will test this on my TV upstairs just to make sure that this does indeed output in 4K. Okay, but with that, I think we've shown that this Xbox is working again, so that's a massive success. What I'm going to do now is just clean everything up, reapply the thermal paste, put it all back together, and then I'll see you when we hook this up to the television. And here we have it, folks. As you can see, the Xbox is running. It's running a game right now, and it's working just fine. I have it hooked up to a 4K monitor, and if we go back to the home menu and just look at the settings, we can see that the Xbox is correctly detecting that it is a 4K monitor. It is switched to 4K and everything is working fine. I've also wiggled the cable on the back just to check that the connection is stable and that the port is stable, and all that is working fine as well. And there we have it, folks. We have another Xbox Series S that we saved from the trash pile and turned into gaming treasure. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I did repairing this console, and if you did, I would really appreciate it if you considered hitting that like button, and maybe if you enjoy this kind of content, even consider hitting that subscribe button. All right, that's all for today. I hope to see you in the next video for the next repair and for the next piece of gaming treasure. Bye for now.